So I was having a conversation with somebody earlier, and they were telling me how 1 foot in and 1 foot out is something that they can't do. So either they're 100% in or they're 100% out. They can't be doing one thing and simultaneously be doing something else. I differ a little bit on this point, and I'll tell you why. If you're doing something and you know for a fact that you cannot operate doing two different things at once, then it's probably best to pick one thing. Now, there are stories that you hear all the time from entrepreneurs stating that they had a job and they were working on their side hustle. And once the side hustle started taking off, they transitioned from the job to the side hustle. The reason I'm more keen on this particular approach is because you can always find a reason to stay where you are. If things were perfect, you would never go anywhere. It's because things are constantly in a state of insufficiency and inadequacy that you decide to make a change. It's because you see something more valuable that you want to pursue. It's because that's more aligned with what you want out of life. That's why you pursue it. And so if you stay where you are and you go 100% on that one thing, if that is not the thing that you want to be doing, it may not be the best approach. Now, it may be good temporarily to get that experience and to be focused. But at a certain point in time, you also have to think for yourself as to what kind of life you want to live and how best to live that life. Sometimes it is to cut all ties and to jump to the next thing, and you may not necessarily know where you're going to land or how you're going to land. There are other individuals, like I mentioned as well, who take the other approach, which is they put in the work in the main area of sustenance, of provisions that allows them to get paid and to live, and they put their other work or their other their time off in areas where they do have they do have that desire to expand and to build and to create, that's more aligned with who they are and what they want, because you're not going to be working at some job 16 hours a day. You're asleep for 8 hours. You're not going to be working at that job 16 hours a day. You're going to have a couple hours every day, probably at least a couple hours every day, at least 1 hour every day to work on that thing. So you have to ask yourself, what is it that you want? And it doesn't mean that you can't fluctuate between the two. It's fine. Remember that nothing in life is static. It's not like you pick something and then you have to stick with it for the rest of your life. It's not like that, because things change. And people talk about this commitment thing. And I'm very pro commitment. I'm not anti commitment. But you can come up with hypothetical scenarios that immediately negate that concept on its face, especially when it's in the context of a work relationship. What happens if it becomes toxic? It becomes abusive. Did you, because you decided to make a commitment last week, now you have to continue until the end of time because you made that commitment? No. So everybody has their own boundaries, everybody has their own limits. Same with a relationship. You might be committed to this person that you think is perfect. And let's take a hypothetical scenario, which actually technically could exist, even though it's very rare, but I think the extremes prove the point. You pick this person and you're with them, and all of a sudden, on a dime, they become abusive, they become neglectful, emotionally abusive, physically abusive, verbally abusive. Just let's just take that example. Where's commitment then? Hmm? Exactly. So the point is, you have to determine what your boundaries are, who you are, and it can change. It can change. It doesn't mean that it has to be that one way all the time. Life isn't like that. The only constant, as they say in life, is change. So keep that in mind. If you have different options available to you, or you want to explore different options, you have to be able to reflect and use your own faculties and determine what is the best approach that you can take right now. Sometimes it is only to focus on that one thing. Sometimes it is to focus on that thing and then have something else on the side. Sometimes it is to distribute your time evenly, depending on how you want to go about it. And all of that can change depending on where you are, your circumstances, and your mindset and what the situation calls for. So just remember that. Don't have that fixed mindset, as they say. Make sure that your mindset is dynamic, and you know that you can do. I don't want to sound cliche here, but you don't know what the upper limits are to what you're able to do, and you don't want to stifle yourself or limit yourself. or put constraints on yourself just because you've heard something from somebody else or from somewhere else, you read it in a book, or your family talks about, your friends talk about, you hear it on the internet. Remember, that's why sometimes it's better to bring things in and to really reflect and find out, what are you aligned with? What is the best option for you? If you're religious, what is God calling you to do? I mean, listen, if you're not, it's okay. You could really just meditate and be with yourself and allow yourself to come up with something that is, come up with a vision or come up with a plan, or really tune into yourself and find out what it is that you want. Sometimes reading actually does help. Reading some philosophy might help me, understanding how to do shadow work or parts work, as they say, or you can use different techniques, but oftentimes a lot of the techniques that you need to use, if you're kind of confused and you're in a hazy place, is really tools to help you connect with yourself, to help you establish your relationship with yourself. And when I say yourself, I mean all parts of yourself, not just the part of you that you like, but even the parts of you that you don't like and that you hate and that maybe you despise or that you're afraid of. All those parts in you exist, and it's okay that they do, because they're always going to be there, and that's normal. You want to be able to establish a relationship with those things, because if you can, then you can communicate with those parts, you can understand them, and then you can have them work in your favor. So everybody, everything is basically on your side, internally. So hopefully that was helpful. I hope you get some use out of that, and I'll keep it nice and short this time around. So I'll see you next time.